Today, we are diving into a piece of Pokemon history that's been a total mystery for almost 20 years. It's a story about a secret, unreleased card set that was basically born out of a massive corporate war. So that's the CEO of the company that brought Pokemon cards to America, talking about one of the most successful games of all time. How does that even happen? How do you go from that reaction to a billion-dollar phenomenon, only to have it all collapse into lawsuits and a legendary ghost set? To really get the story, we've got to rewind back to the late 90s. Pokémon was absolutely exploding, right? And Nintendo was desperate to bring the trading card game to America. But there was one huge roadblock in their way. And you gotta understand, this patent was a massive deal. It basically meant that if Nintendo wanted to sell Pokémon cards in the US, they had no other choice. They had to partner with Wizards of the Coast, or WotC for short. This wasn't a partnership they wanted, it was one they were forced into. And you know what? This forced partnership was insanely successful. The Pokémon TCG became this cultural giant, making up a huge piece of this $15 billion pie. But all that money, it just raised the stakes for the conflict that was brewing right under the surface. So even with all that success, the two companies had completely different ideas about what their partnership actually was. And this wasn't some small disagreement. We're talking a fundamental clash of who they were as companies, and it was going to tear the whole thing apart. Okay, so this is the absolute core of the problem. Nintendo saw WotC as just a distributor, a custodian. Their job was simple: translate the cards and get them in stores. But WotC, the company that invented Magic the Gathering, saw themselves as game designers. They thought the Pokemon TCG was kind of broken, and it was their job to fix it, to make it their game. They were on a collision course from day one. And this wasn't just some abstract disagreement. It had real, tangible consequences. WotC's first original card, Dark Raichu, caused a 3-month delay for a major set. They started hiking prices, treating the whole thing like a commodity to be squeezed for cash. And their attempts to fix cards, it led to a crazy 44% error rate on the cards they changed, including, famously, printing a Dark Persian with literally no HP at all. You can imagine Nintendo was not happy. So all of this tension just kept building and building until it hit a breaking point. For Wizards of the Coast, the end didn't come from a phone call or an official letter. Nope, it came in a box, delivered from their own printer. It was basically a warning shot. Just let that quote sink in. Can you imagine opening a package and realizing in that one moment that your biggest partner has been secretly working behind your back to cut you out of the deal completely? That's what happened here. The package contained a sheet of uncut promo cards, but here's the key detail. They were e-reader cards, which required a special printing process that only WotC's printer was set up to handle. The message was crystal clear. Nintendo was testing the printer to see if they could just make the cards themselves without WotC at all. The writing wasn't just on the wall. It was on an uncut sheet of cardboard. The partnership was over. Wizards of the Coast knew they were about to lose their golden goose. So the question became, what were they going to do about it? Knowing their days were numbered, WotC decided to do something they'd wanted to do from the very beginning: create their own, totally original Pokemon set. The codename was Jamboree, and it was supposed to be their masterpiece, their final defiant act. And their plans for Jamboree were pretty wild. They were finally going to bring over those weird, cool Japanese Vending Series cards, design their own unique Pokemon, hire Western artists, and maybe even throw in some goofy gag cards. This was set to be the first truly American Pokemon TCG set. For years and years, Jamboree was just a legend, right? Something whispered about on internet forums. But now we actually have proof. Real physical playtest cards used by the designers at Wizards of the Coast have been found. It confirms that Jamboree wasn't just some idea, it was real. So check this out. This is the first piece of evidence that ever showed up. It's just a blank card with Jolteon handwritten on it in marker. This is how they would workshop ideas, just quickly scribbling things down to test them out. And this Jolteon was a key part of their plan. Next up, we've got a trainer card called Bill's Advice. And what's so incredible about this one is that it's actually signed by Mike Boozer, the head of R&D. It's like a little artifact straight from the mind of the guy who was leading the charge. And finally, a test card for a technical machine, or TM. When you see these three things together, a Pokemon, a trainer, and a TM, It proves that Jamboree was a fully formed idea that they were actively working on, a project that, sadly, was never going to see the light of day. So when Nintendo made it official and announced they were taking the license back, WotC did not go quietly into the night. According to former employees, the company went into what they called scorched earth mode. Their plan was, well, it was brutal. First, they threatened lawsuits. Then, they just dumped their entire inventory of cards onto the market to crash the price and devalue everything. One employee even said the goal was to ruin Pokémon on the way out. And they weren't kidding. The literal day after their contract expired, they sued Nintendo. So, Jamboree was canceled. WotC was out of the picture. But that leaves us with the biggest question of this whole story. What happened to all that work? All the designs, all the cards that were created for this lost set? Did they all just disappear, get shredded, or did they secretly find their way into the game anyway? For almost 20 years, nobody knew the answer. Until, that is, the man who designed the set finally decided to talk. And there you have it, the bombshell, straight from Mike Boozer himself. Nintendo didn't let all that work just go to waste. According to him, they took the designs for Jamboree and quietly slipped them into one of their own sets. The evidence all points to one set in particular, EX Sandstorm. Now look at this. The American version came out before its Japanese counterpart, which is already super weird. But it also had 47 extra cards that just appeared out of nowhere. These cards included a bunch of Gen 1 and 2 Pokémon that didn't fit the era at all, and, most importantly, a Jolteon. The lost Jamboree cards weren't gone. They were hiding in plain sight this whole time. You know, the story of Jamboree is just such a fascinating peek behind the curtain at the crazy corporate battles that shape the stuff we love. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other secret histories, what other lost projects and bitter fights are hiding just beneath the surface of the pop culture we think we know so well?